So I welcome everybody to this webinar, and a particular warm welcome to Namita Ranganathan and Meena Panikar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this is the second in our series. Professor Ghosh might have mentioned to you in gender sensitization. And we did one last year, and then the pandemic, so we could not continue. But we do hope to have it continuously. The only thing I want to mention, while welcoming and starting this whole program, is that we can never, what should I say, take this lightly. Okay, this is very important. When I sent the email, I didn't say mandatory and things like this, but it is very important because ignorance is no more an excuse. That we don't know this, we didn't know this, oh, that was what was meant to be, I didn't mean this. No, those things are not accepted anymore. So we should be absolutely clear about what the legal position is, what the acceptance, social acceptance rules are, and make the workplace better. This is probably the single most important thing that has happened in the modern day workplace after the IT revolution. It's about the gender balance and maintaining the diversity in workplace. So we look forward to the discussion today. And I leave it to Professor Ghosh now to introduce the speakers and proceed with the talks. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mishra, for giving me this opportunity to start this very important dialogue for IEG. It's more of a conversation, I guess. I am Nilabja Ghosh. I chair the Gender Sensitization Against Sexual Harassment, GS-CASH of IEG. And let me at the outset clarify that in GS-CASH, we work closely with the ICC to fulfill IEG's policy, which is evolving towards Vishakha, that law, which is against the sexual protection against sexual harassment. And sexual harassment of women at workplace, prevention, prohibition, and redressal of 2013. So, secondly, although we advocate a zero tolerance approach towards sexual harassment, but GS-CASH is mostly oriented towards prevention of any untoward gender events by trying to strengthen the understanding and sensitivity without any bias on gender issues. So I think we had one lecture maybe in 2019 where there were a lot of interest was aroused and a lot of questions raised, and many of them remained unresolved also. So in this lecture, we are fortunate to have invited two very eminently suitable speakers for a research institute like IEG, which has so much of variation in terms of you can say education level or education subjects, and then our culture, age groups, and of course the gender. Both men, women, young men, women, they work together, they work like colleagues and friends. So it's a kind of specialized need is there. And we are very thankful that both speakers from academia have agreed to share their own deductions, which is based on long years of study and teaching and research. And we'll try to meet your queries also with their arguments and sensitivity towards current times and society, because that's very dynamic today. So the talks will be about 40 to 45 minutes by the two speakers, followed by some question answers. Just a few lines about the speakers. The first speaker, I think, will be Srimati Namita Ranganathan. Am I right? She is professor in...
Yes, I'll speak first.
Okay. She is a professor in the Department of Education in Delhi University. She has been head of the department and dean till 2019. and her academic training has mostly been in psychology and education. She has a PhD in education from JNU. She's been teaching and also involved in research with focus on human development, personality, and gender development, and very interestingly on issues related to leadership and empowerment of girls. She has been counseling on sexual harassment and was presiding officer of ICC in DU from 2016 to 2020. Our second speaker is Srimati Meena S. Panikkar, who is specialized in law and is faculty teaching in the Faculty of Law in Delhi University. She has also taught in the most prestigious law institute, NUJS of Kolkata. Her research interest includes interface between law and society, very relevant in this case, as also other topics like media freedom, role of NGOs in development, environment. She has held the post of Deputy Dean Legal and has been advisor of ICC for several years. No, and thank you very much to both speakers, and I think we can begin it. Mr. Namita.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Neelabja, for this very warm welcome and introduction. And to you also, Professor Mishra, for making this day possible. I must say that, Professor Neelabja, I think, has a lot of passion for this area. And that's quite commendable. Because, when you see people have passion, then they do a lot of work in the area. And I can see, she contacted me 2 months ago to set up this day and make it possible. So I'm very happy to be here. And I have the courage to be here. मैं आप सबसे यही बात कह रही हूँ. I have the courage to be here because एक तो होता है कि हम पढ़ते हैं जेंडर के बारे में और हमने जो पढ़ा है और जो रिसर्च किया हम वो शेयर करते हैं आपके साथ. वो तो एक बात है. दूसरी बात ये है कि हमें hands on practical experience as the presiding officer of the Internal Complaints Committee of Delhi University. I was fortunate to hold that office for 4 years, and we had a variety of cases on sexual harassment and even on gender relations, some of which we resolved through counseling. They did not become punitive cases, and some of which became fairly complex cases. And Meena and I have worked together in these spheres very closely. So when Professor Neelabja ne mujhe jab contact kiya, then I told her I will bring a co-panelist with me to give it a more complete structure and to present a more beneficial understanding to all the audience and those who want to also ask questions. So we have titled our lecture, Gender Relations and Prevention of Sexual Harassment at the Workplace. And we are going to take up the different contours and the different issues. So when I say contours, there are certain givens, there are certain assumptions in Indian society. I will take up those and I will focus on the gender relations aspect. And then I will request my colleague Meena to, take up this whole issue of sexual harassment and the socio-legal position, because she has a very good training both in sociology and in legal studies. And she will also tell you how redressal happens and what it leads to, etc. और आपके जो भी प्रश्न होंगे, we would be happy to take those up. Okay, so let me begin by focusing on gender relations and telling you how in contemporary times, आधुनिक संदर्भ में, how we should actually understand gender relations. I'm going to start by saying gender is not just an issue of women or men. Gender is a people's issue. आप सोचिए जो मैं कह रही हूँ. जेंडर का कंसर्न केवल महिलाओं के साथ नहीं है. जेंडर का कंसर्न केवल पुरुष के साथ नहीं है. Gender concerns all of us equally. It's a people's issue. इसका मतलब क्या हुआ? इससे हम क्या influence निकालते हैं? And all sociologists now, particularly those who work in applied sectors, even psychologists who work in applied sectors, call it a people's issue. So how is it a people's issue? It means that there is a certain complementarity, males and females, and now we have also the transgender, the third gender in our spectrum, all of whom have equal status and legal status. It is important that we understand that collectively we constitute this universe called gender. Okay, previously all the mechanisms used to be in favor of women in terms of protecting women, and women were made out to be these very soft persons, victims, and always at the receiving end of male predators. पहले ये notion हुआ करता था, अभी भी है कहीं कहीं, क्योंकि पेट्रियार्की जो है, एक पितृ सत्ता जो एक notion है, that is very very deeply ensconced, बहुत गहराई से हमारी मानसिकता में भरी रहती है. लेकिन अब हम क्या देखते हैं, हम आधुनिक संदर्भ की बात ही करेंगे, that women have now entered all walks of life. Even in the fighting squads and in the highest flying squads of the defense services, women have gained access. There is absolutely no profession in which their entry is debarred. And we have some women achievers who have made it to all walks of life. इसका मतलब क्या है कि हमने समाज में मान लिया है कि दोनों का एक इक्वल दर्जा हो सकता है. So the issue no longer is one of equity. Equity, though, who would know better than people from the Institute of Economic Growth, that in equity the assumption is that there will be some inequalities, and the less equal will be brought up to the level of the more equal, and then they will be at par. So we are not looking at this any longer from just an equity lens. That's a very narrow lens. And जब वो lens था, women were actually led to believe that they have to be empowered. They have to be given some strength. They have to be given some access opportunities. They have to be given some support. They have to be scaffolded throughout. My point is, everybody needs support and scaffold. Whether we are men, whether we are women, whether we are transgenders, हम किसी भी gender को belong करते हैं, we are people first, we are human beings first. And each one of us is therefore equal to each other. If we look at the Constitution of India and we look at the preamble of our Constitution, equality and non-discrimination are very, very strong words in that Constitution. Constitution of India is introduced in class 6 to children. उनको preamble रटवाया जाता है. You know, they are taught the preamble and then they are taught to deconstruct the preamble. तो उनके दिमाग में उस समय उनके कोमल दिमाग होते हैं. They don't have very definitive minds at class 6. But these ideas or these seeds are planted in their minds that equality is something we commit to, the state commits to, and we commit to as the people of India and as citizens of India. And the second thing which we tell our children in class 6 is that there will be no discrimination. And gender is cited as one of the key issues where there will be no discrimination. So when we assume that gender is a people's issue, we are talking about how at the workplace, because now our concern is with the workplace, we are all responsible adults. How do we ensure that our workplace is safe, it's happy, and there is gender compatibility, what we call, what the feminists would also call gender complementarity. मैं आपको एक मिनट में gender complementarity का notion बताना चाहती हूँ, because once we know the notion of gender complementarity, it will be very easy for us to understand how we can actually manage to have a happy, a safe, and a very compatible workspace. Gender complementarity का notion ये है that there are some tasks that women do better. There are some tasks that men do better. And if we look at the species, not only at the human species, but even if we look at the animal kingdom, we look at the plant kingdom, they also have gendering in the animal kingdom and in the plant kingdom as we do in the human kingdom. We find that those issues which are designated to women doing better, such as childbearing, child rearing, mothering, etc., and those which men do better because they are biologically stronger, they have more musculature, they have more muscular strength, etc. Let us not make that a point of contestation. Let us actually value the other gender for what they can do better. If we value them for what they can do better and we don't undermine them and we don't try to compete with them, combat them or fight them, हम ये उनको मान्यता देते हैं और उनको इज्जत देते हैं इस बात के लिए, then we would believe that we actually have what is called a relational sense of equality. That women can do some things better, let us celebrate them for what they can do better. Men do some things better, let us celebrate them for what they can do better. And let us not be at cross purposes and try to fight all the time. That is gender complementarity. So gender complementarity becomes a very, very important component of gender relations at the workplace. Now, मैंने आपसे एक और बात कही that हम लोग we are human first. पहले हम मानव हैं, उसके बाद हम gendered हैं, ठीक है? So we are born human. So when we are born human, there are some human qualities world over across human beings which we are taught, which automatically we are socialized into in this world. To have respect for all, to be inclusive by nature, to have a sense of empathy, to have a curiosity to understand and know what is there in our environment, to be able to cooperate, to be able to collaborate, to be able to say what we want to do, to have a sense of democratic freedom, especially in the Indian context. So I can speak, I can say, I can converse, I can dialogue with everybody, and I can have shared communication. Now, if you look at this list of qualities that I have made, I have listed these out deliberately. Why have I listed these out? If we are following these and we can actually practice these at our workplace, and whether we are male or we are female or we are transgender, it doesn't matter which gender we belong to, अगर ये सब संभव होता हमारे workplace, then it would not matter whether I'm male or I'm female. What problematizes the whole situation is that when I bring these qualities from a gendered lens, कि मैं आदमी हूं तो मैं तो ऐसे ही बात करूंगा, मैं तो ऐसे ही सोचूंगा, आदमी तो ऐसे ही करते हैं. Similarly, women, औरतों को शोभा नहीं देता है, ये हमें नहीं करना चाहिए, वो हमें नहीं करना चाहिए, हमारा ये belief system है. It is when we bring our closed, prejudiced, stereotypical minds to the workplace that the problems and the issues arise. So मेरा पहला contention जो है वो ये है that let us be people first, let us be humans first, and then let gender follow. And gender may be, my appeal to everybody is that let us start with the rational components of gender. Equal access, equal opportunities, change in the social systems, many more women at the workplace, even in the highest of positions, women and men working neck to neck with common shared goals at a common workplace. These are all rational realities. So हम ये सोच के चलें कि जब हम workplace में जाते हैं, I am a professional, and as a professional, these are some of my commitments, these are some of my characteristics. लेकिन मैं ये भी आपके साथ शेयर करना चाहूंगी कि बहुत आसान नहीं है कि हमारी जो एक कल्चरल साइकी है या जो हमारी मानसिकता है, संस्कृति जो हमारे दिमाग में बन गई है पीढ़ियों से, सालों से, उसको भी टोटली हम नकार नहीं सकते, because somewhere it makes its intrusions. So what I always suggest to people as a psychologist is, if you have to have better gender relations at the workplace, it's important कि आपके जितने myths हैं, जितने misconceptions हैं, जितने आपके belief structures हैं जो बहुत strong हैं, उनको आप सामने लाइए और उनको आप क्वेश्चन करिए, उनको आप रिफ्यूट करिए थ्रू द एक्ट ऑफ सेल्फ नेगोशिएशन. जरूरी नहीं है कि आप डायलॉग ही करें, और लोगों के साथ डायलॉग भी आप कर सकते हैं, लेकिन नहीं तो आप एक नेगोशिएशन अपने आप से करिए. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, प्रॉब्लम्स क्या आते हैं वर्क प्लेस से, और हमने आईसीसी में देखे हैं, that when men see women as sex objects. ठीक है? Now the fact that women are not sex objects, they are not employed at the workplace to be sex objects. They are employed because they are qualified, they are trained, they can also do the work very well, and they are therefore employed for those inputs for the institution. So अगर हमारे दिमाग में, किसी आदमी के दिमाग में, लेट्स इमेजिन ये चीज घूम रही है कि विमेन तो इजी प्रे हैं, है ना, सच बुझ के आती हैं, दे आर सेक्स ऑब्जेक्ट्स. इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट दैट मेन सेल्फ नेगोशिएट दिस एंड टेल देमसेल्व्स दैट एक्चुअली आज के संदर्भ में दिस इज नॉट ट्रू एट ऑल. एंड अगर ये बात आ रही है मेरे दिमाग में, मुझे रैशनली इसको तोड़ना है. I have to come to some kind of self-justification. Similarly, they are not vulnerable and weak. अगर आदमी ये सोचते हैं, और there's no offense to the men at all, but you know, because of the Vishakha judgment and the Bhavari Devi case, I'm sure Meena will tell us all about that. How this whole thing started was with the rape of Bhavari Devi, and how Vishakha took this up, and finally we had the Vishakha guidelines. So I'm compelled to take, and there are many more instances of women being raped and abused and torn apart. Therefore, I'm taking examples of an extreme kind, but there is no offense meant to any male here. I'm merely demonstrating what men can do, what all of us can do as people. So women are not vulnerable and weak. We have to break this. We have to actually break this belief and tell us it's a misconception. Men have to tell themselves it's a misconception. Similarly, women have to believe that all men are not predators. If women think that, you know, our safety at the workplace is always at stake because there's so many men around, let women self-negotiate and tell themselves that all men are not predators. Men can also be their best friends. They can be very empathetic. They can be extremely supportive, extremely collaborative, and we have to therefore reorient our thought processes. Similarly, we can agree to believe that men and women can be very collegial and compatible and be the best of friends. I want to share a very small example with you here, that at any workplace, if men and women are sitting together, let's say one man and one woman is sitting together, they are sharing their lunch, they are involved in an intimate dialogue with each other. They could be talking about the workspace, they could be talking about some personal issue, but that's not a love, sex, and romance relationship. But we have minds which are morally corrupted and trained in belief systems that there should be gender isolation, there should be gender segregation, and women should only befriend women, men should only befriend men. And we bring this culture to the workplace as well. And so in the workplace, ek tamasha ban jata hai. I am telling you to actually safeguard against that and agree and tell yourselves rationally that men and women equally can be very good friends with each other without a love, sex, and romance interlude in it. So that's another misconception which I thought I should clear with you. You know, basically, women should not have to fight for their rights. In psychology, we say that women have to assert their psychological rights. I'm free, I want to speak, I want to be heard. I also have agency in me. You know, मैं भी capable हूँ. They always having to fight and be combative. That is not the issue. So in the workplace, if we are human, if we are professional, if we can combat all our myths and misconceptions, if we can restate our goals and objectives of being at the workplace, and if we can see our workplace as a compendium of professionals who have come together to actually serve an institution, it doesn't matter what their gender is, we would be on a better playing field. And we have to make that playing field a level playing field. That is very, very important. So, you know, I'm telling women equally. हर वक्त हम ये कहते हैं कि men जो हैं, they tend to dominate, they tend to bulldoze, they tend to capture, they tend to limit the opportunities of women. ये हम हमेशा ये विश्वास करते हैं कि बहुत domination men का है, चाहे वो teaching cadres में हो, चाहे वो administrative cadres में हो, we tend to say the same thing. But it is not true. अगर आप देखिए तो जेंडर जो है वो बटा हुआ है, और इसी के साथ मैं एंड करूंगी बिकॉज आई थिंक आई विल लीव यू विद इनफ थॉट्स एंड देन आई विल हैंड इट ओवर टू मीना. जेंडर जो है दैट इज हिस्टोरिकली नॉट स्टैटिक, इट इज डायनामिक एंड इट इज एवर चेंजिंग. अगर आप देखिए who are the people we actually celebrate, who are the people we believe were true human beings, and each one of you, आप सबके रोल मॉडल्स या आपके आदर्श अलग अलग हो सकते हैं, लेकिन अगर आप उनकी क्वालिटीज एनालाइज करेंगे, सब में एक सेंस ऑफ एम्पैथी, दूसरे को समझने की जो एक भावना होती है वो होगी, सब में विनम्रता होगी, अ सेंस ऑफ ह्यूमिलिटी, सब में एक ओपन माइंडेडनेस होगा, सब में एक डायलॉगबिलिटी होगी कि वो सबसे कम्युनिकेट करके डायलॉग कर सकते हैं, सब में एक सेंस ऑफ कोलैबोरेशन होगा कि वो एक्चुअली मिलजुल कर भी काम कर सकते हैं, और सब में एक तेजी अपनी होगी, दिमाग उनका अच्छा होगा, जो कार्य उनको मिलता है वो बहुत लगन से और बहुत मजबूती से and with great competence they can discharge and fulfill. And this applies equally to men and women. So gender relations at the workplace should not actually bring our prejudices, our stereotypes, and the classical mindsets which our ancestors had about how gender plays out at the workplace. So if we come like this to the workplace, it doesn't matter, we will all do very well. You know, you can also see, मैं आपको 3-4 बहुत simple बातें, facts बताना चाह रही हूँ, because those are very illustrative facts about competence and capability. अगर आप देखिए, because I teach in the Department of Education, I can give you data from my department. The number of men who are now trying to become school teachers, and right from the pre-primary level right up to the end of the school years, is phenomenal. First, school teaching was a completely feminized profession. You only had women applicants and candidates. एक आधा males आते थे. Now this year we have 70% men and 30% women. इसी तरह से अगर आप देखिए तो management में, IITs में, you know, where engineering and managerial jobs, especially the sort of multinational managerial jobs, used to be a male bastion. That's no longer true. Secondly, the world's best tailors, and we have 3 women whom I can see on this screen just now, are all men. The best dress designers for women's garments are men, which means they can fathom, they can imagine, they can fully recognize what women's interests in dressing and presentation are. The world's best chefs are all men. And to be a Michelin star chef or to be a world-class chef is actually a very big, it's like getting the Nobel Prize in culinary arts. And they are all men. The majority is men. So, you know, we were not born to believe that this is for men and this is for women. We are seeing a lot of now transformative activity, a lot of, you know, breaking of barriers, a lot of porous borders in different professions. So अगर हम ये सब ध्यान में रखें, and we do self-argumentation and we keep on rationalizing this, अपने आप हमारी behavior, हमारे emotions और हमारी world view एक complementarity की ओर आ जाएंगे, and there will be much better, much smoother, much more conducive gender relations at the workplace. So I leave you with a few of these ideas. And now I request Meena to take up the latter half of what we had focused on, which is prevention of sexual harassment at the workplace. Over to you, Meena.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So it's good that you set the stage for me to speak about, because Professor Namita had set the background of how gender discrimination operates and how the bias is created from with the very early years of our upbringing at different places in school, in institutions, in workplaces, etc. And later on, you can see that reflection happening, the discriminations. You can also, मैं आपको ये भी बोलूंगी कि the fundamental principle is about equality. All are equal, and we can't say that some are more equal than others. When we speak about equality, equality means all to be treated equally or like to be treated equally. जो लोग हैं वो इकट्ठा एक ग्रुप हो सकता है क्योंकि वो like similar kind of people है, उनके लिए equality जरूरी है. और equality means also that वो कानून से ऊपर कोई भी हो नहीं सकता. Nobody is above law. तो ये whole discussion gender discrimination है, जो भी तरीके का discrimination होता है वो सब equality के ऊपर based है. तो ये कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में एक प्रिंसिपल है, आर्टिकल 14, 14 नंबर है उनका, इक्वालिटी बिफोर लॉ एंड इक्वल प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ लॉ. एंड जो नमिता मैम ने अभी बोला वो सब सेंटर्ड अराउंड द प्रिंसिपल ऑफ इक्वालिटी. वो जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में प्रोविजन है, अगर नहीं है तो भी इक्वालिटी इज अ पार्ट ऑफ अ बेसिक ह्यूमन राइट ऑफ अ पर्सन. तो इतना इम्पोर्टेंट प्रिंसिपल है, उसमें जेंडर के बेसिस पर जो डिफरेंसेस होता है, जिस तरह से डिफरेंट जेंडर्स को ट्रीट करते हैं पीपल बेस्ड ऑन जेंडर इश्यूज, दैट इज व्हाट इज टू बी डेल्ट विथ बाय लॉ. तो कानून क्या करते हैं? एक तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में ये प्रोविजन है. यू ऑल्सो कम अक्रॉस अदर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रोविजंस, एटलीस्ट some of you may have seen the Bollywood movie Article 15, in which Ayushmann Khurrana is dealing with the issues, atrocities on the basis of caste discrimination basically, but what you also will see is the discrimination or atrocities against the Dalit women being portrayed. So you can see that women go through layers of discrimination. It's not only on the basis of caste discrimination, but also because they happen to be women, they're coming from weaker sections of the society. So discrimination ka level gets amplified. वो ज़्यादा issue हो जाता है when the target is the women. So caste, the weaker sections status, सब इकट्ठा होकर एक बड़ा issue बन जाता है. So Article 15 movie gives you an insight into the kind of society which the Constitution is highlighting about. And for that reason, the Constitution also speaks about the measures of empowerment, उनका dignity protect करे, और जब women workplace में है तो उनका safety and security कैसे कानून के मदद से हो सकता है. तो ये जो कानून है within the framework of the Indian legal system, you will see apart from Constitution, we did not have much to say about clear laws enacted by the state legislature or parliament. And that led to the crisis in Vishakha, the Vishakha case of 1995 or 96 decided by the Supreme Court, wherein detailed guidelines were issued by the Supreme Court for creation of committees within the institutions because there was no other law. So the court had to rely on constitution, the court had to rely on international treaties about discrimination against women, etc. That was in 95-96. आप ये भी देख सकते हैं कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बनाया 50 में, फिर हुआ 95 का ये विशाखा जजमेंट, उसके बाद पार्लियामेंट ने कानून बनाया 2013 में, 2013 में लेजिस्लेशन बनाया, फिर उसके अंडर रूल्स भी बनाया. So that is the rule, this legislation 2013 along with the rules which has been primarily used. इसके अलावा अभी UGC ने भी 2015 में regulations, detailed regulations बनाया इसके लिए. वो इसलिए कि हमारा एक होता है कि जो यूनिवर्सिटी का एक सिस्टम है, ये 2013 एक्ट का कुछ एप्लीकेबिलिटी में थोड़ा प्रॉब्लम था, बिकॉज दीज वर मेंट टू बी फॉर गवर्नमेंट डिपार्टमेंट्स. तो यूनिवर्सिटी का एक एटमॉस्फेयर होता है, उनका हॉस्टल होता है, उनका यूनिवर्सिटी का बसेस होता है, स्पोर्ट्स इंस्टीट्यूट्स होता है, फील्ड ट्रिप में स्टूडेंट्स जाते हैं, टीचर्स उनके साथ होता है. You can also see that training programs will be conducted in the university. At times, students' cultural festivals are held in auditoriums. It may be even outside the university premises. So you see that the campus of the university will have to be understood quite broadly. So, and also the kind of people who are part of the university system include all categories of people who come for discharging various functions. So it need not be students alone. It can also be the people who impart training, those who live in the university's premises, may not be employees. तो वो सारे लोग इनके डेफिनेशन रेगुलेशंस के अंडर आ जाते हैं. इसलिए यूजीसी रेगुलेशंस हैव मेड अ डिटेल्ड अटेम्प्ट टू मैप आउट द प्लेसेस एंड द पर्सन्स व्हिच कुड बी कवर्ड within the scope of sexual harassment prevention and redressal measures. लेकिन देखने पर आपको पता चलेगा it's primarily aiming at women. Then you can also see students, where students without mentioning about gender are also covered within its ambit. So when you look at law, you will see the constitution, you will see the parliament legislation, the 2013 legislation, the rules framed by the Ministry of Women and Child Development under this 2013 legislation. Then you also see the UGC regulations. Now, all these are therefore binding on universities. इसलिए दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी भी अपने एग्जीक्यूटिव काउंसिल के थ्रू ये रेगुलेशंस अडॉप्ट किया है. दिल्ली यूनिवर्सिटी का एक डेडिकेटेड स्पेस भी है आईसीसी के लिए, और उसमें डिटेल्स दे रहे हैं क्या functions, powers, etc., who are the members of ICC, their details for contact, etc. Now, quite often here question aata hai ki who could complain and how to do the complaint and what could be the scope of the meaning of sexual harassment, wherein you will see that the UGC regulations and the 2013 Parliament law clearly mentions about complainant as an aggrieved woman. लेकिन UGC regulations में students को भी irrespective of referring to gender इसके aspect में लेकर आए. Now aggrieved woman, जो woman ये complaint फाइल करना चाहते हैं, उनके लिए काफी टाइम प्रोसीजर्स पता नहीं होगा, लेकिन इसलिए ये इम्पोर्टेंट है कि जो आपके ये कमिटी है जीएस कैश के थ्रू जेंडर सेंसिटाइजेशन करते हैं, उससे लोगों को ज्यादा पता होता है ऐसे बोर्ड भी यूनिवर्सिटी में फंक्शन कर रहे। तो जब कंप्लेंट है आईसीसी में फाइल कर सकते हैं। अगर it need not be that no everybody is comfortable in writing a complaint, so ICC members or its office can actually help them to write the complaint. But we also came across situations where class 4 employees had cases, the women employees had the cases where we needed to actually, you can imagine, to write a complaint in a format, etc. So we need to extend our support from ICC to facilitate so that their complaint will be filed and they will understand how the procedures are taking place and they understand what kind of points need to be communicated to the ICC, etc. So complaint file करना उसके लिए जो activity के ऊपर आप complain कर रहे हैं, so that sexual harassment का meaning भी काफी comprehensive level पर अभी UGC regulations में cover किया है. So there are many ways of looking at now with the coming of smartphones and the way social media is being used. You come across cases where a lot of chats take place, sending of images take place, then sending of certain kind of videos or capturing videos and then trying to blackmail later on, etc. will happen. So you can see that if it contains sexual connotation, of course, you will see that it also involves an element of subjectivity where you feel that something is with which you are not comfortable, or ये मुझे लगता है कि इसमें तो intention कुछ और है. So then and then you see you keep monitoring and then you feel that it is nothing but it's kind of harassment to me. So you prefer to move. In office spaces also, you will see that when it is a woman employee, then the kind of bias, which is quite a part of us, gets reflected in our behavior. As Professor Namita had indicated about the fact that we are in workplace through our own merit, our own skill and talent, and let us focus on that. Why should I be viewed rather than as an employee in the first place? As far as the expectation from me is concerned, it is about my work or it's about my studies if I'm a student. Why should I be targeted because of my gender? That is where that discriminatory element or the bias starts getting reflected in the behavior of people. At least some, we are not generalizing on any account. लेकिन ये कैसे sexual harassment होता है, क्योंकि इसमें हमने ऐसा भी cases देखा है, people speak about I have not been provided, I have not been sanctioned my leave, मुझे मेरे से ज्यादा काम लेते हैं और मुझे ऐसे work environment देते हैं, it is torture and therefore it is sexual harassment. We came across cases where we had to actually see that there are instances where there was no mention of sexual harassment. So we needed to interact with them and see why they would like to bring this case before ICC. हमने ये भी देखा है कि कुछ में ये mixed up है, administrative भी है, sexual भी है, सब mix है. So demarcating and keeping them in separate boxes is not possible. So therefore, how do you find sexual harassment in the so-called activities? Though a meaning is been provided in the definition, we will also have to see it in the circumstances in which certain facts are placed. And then usually the complainant, we request them to put it in the written format. And if they want to have mentioning the name of witnesses, अगर उन्होंने किसी से शेयर किया है, उन्होंने सपोर्ट किया है, वो सब है तो नाम भी लिखने के लिए बोलते हैं. फिर we send the copy of this complaint with the attachments to the respondent, the person against whom the complaint is made, or it may be a group of people against whom the complaint is being made, and then ask the respondents to give their submissions in a specific period of time, maybe 7 days or 10 days. And then based on those communications, we start, so the process will begin with the admission of the complaint, on which the ICC members will deliberate, and then inquiry will happen as per the procedure which is indicated in the rules and the regulations. We have to follow the procedures which are also part of general law, because sexual offenses, the offenses about sexual harassment are characterized under criminal law. So the general principles of criminal law also will be applicable. You also have to follow the principles of natural justice, party को, complainant, respondent सबको hearing का opportunity देना, उन्होंने ICC से interact करके written submissions देना, और witnesses है तो witnesses का भी submissions record करना, ये सब यार procedures वो general law के under होता है. तो ये rule में regulation में नहीं लिखा है तो भी हमें ये procedures follow करना है. Or then we prepare findings based on the submissions and interaction, and then we send the findings copies to complainant and respondents for their observations, in which we ask them to express their opinion regarding cross-examination. So if they want to have cross-examination, then they should submit a list of questions to us, because we would like to exchange the questions to the other party, and then the answers could be provided. Preferably, again, this is again in writing, because written documents will form more effective for the purpose of evidence, and it gives more clarity. Of course, these are very, very rigorous stages, because a lot of emotions are played out. So as ICC members, we need to respect the sentiments of people, and then also give them a comfortable environment. Yeah, I think there was some connectivity problem. So we provide an amicable environment. Am I audible?
Yes, Meena,
Yes,
you're
yes.
audible now.
I hope
Yes,
so.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. So as far as possible, we need to be giving a respectful, dignified treatment to all the parties to the proceedings, and make them comfortable to share their expressions. And then we request them to have the written submissions with their signature and date, so that it's part of our record. And then we also see that, at times, because these are also, I said, there is a turbulence possible because of the emotional display. And it's often very difficult for a victim of sexual harassment come before a committee and make very concrete, effective submissions, because it speaks about a violation of their dignity. It speaks about the threat which they are facing in terms of promotions, in terms of losing jobs. Yeah, so it also a lot of experience in about understanding how that waves pass through in the minds of the complainants. Now, I would say I'm not giving an undue comparative advantage to victims, but I'm saying that it would take a lot of time and effort on the part of complainant with serious allegations to come before the ICC. So ICC also, as we were members of the ICC, we tried to create that environment of comfort where they would be able to share their versions much more in a better fashion. And then we could pick up the threads and see how the proceedings are to be completed. At the same time, because the respondents also have the same set of rights, which we need to respect in terms of getting copies of documents, in terms of bringing in their witnesses, and the ICC hearing to their versions, etc. However, you can see that once the ICC has completed the hearings and then gone through all the documentary evidence, we also ask them if they have recordings, CDs, photos, etc., that they could submit to the ICC. And then we prepare the finding the collection is going frequently. So then we submit the report, and the report is complete only if it is attached with all the annexures. The annexures would include the submission copy of the complaint, the submissions made by the respondents, the witnesses' statements, then all the documentary evidence in whatever form. If it is a CD, then we would try to keep it in a proper form so that tampering with documents would be possible. We need to take an extremely careful precautionary measures. Then, so all these are submitted then to the registrar of the university, if it is in the case of Delhi University. And then the decision on which is taken by the Executive Council of the university. So the report will be placed before the EC, and then the decision will be taken by the EC as a collective body. Now, under the UGC regulations of 2015, they have brought in the appeal provisions. So you can see that over the years, there are changes in the way the law is been addressing this issue of sexual harassment at workplace. Because there were earlier CAPEX committees of the university, now it is replaced by the Internal Complaints Committee, from which under the UGC regulations of 2015, an appeal could be represented to the employer by the complainant or the respondents or both. And then the employer will have to address that appeal and if they are not following the recommendations of the ICC, then the reasons for not following shall be communicated to the ICC. But if they are following the ICC recommendations, if you look at the UGC regulations, the emphasis is on following the recommendations of the ICC. So the exception is in instances where for cited reasons, the complainant and the respondent prefers an appeal before the employer. So you can see that apart from this kind of a procedural mechanism worked out through ICC, the UGC regulations also emphasize on a number of measures which the employer will need to take up in order to empower the community, university community, about these regulations in terms of gender discrimination, in terms of empowerment of women at workplace, how students and all employees could be working in a safe environment, should display on prominent places about these regulations and zero tolerance, etc. You can see that, so the approach is on both ways. It is not only an effort to look at and impose penalties, punishments. UGC regulations also speak about even compensation to the victim in the substantive cases. Apart from that, generating a conducive environment for work is also emphasized in the UGC regulations. You can also see that there is a conciliatory measures could be worked out. This is there in the 2013 legislation, also in the UGC regulations. However, that is at the instance of the complainant. If the complainant doesn't want to proceed with the matter and would like to have a conciliation, that can be worked out with the assistance of ICC, and any such conciliation shall be having a record, so it shall be in writing. And then, however, it does not mean that ICC could actually compel the complainant to withdraw the case, or in some indirect fashion to make those kind of measures which are nothing but insisting on withdrawing the complaint. You can also see that these measures may all depend. There are intermediate interim reliefs which can be provided depending on the kind of case. So we had instances of complaints from research scholars where Professor Namita used to write to the Research Council after we take a decision in the ICC about issuing certain advisories, or the Research Council to assist the scholar in terms of continuing research. You can also see how the leaves could be sanctioned. So there are certain aspects which may not be perfectly fitting within the university framework of the teachers, transfer of teachers, etc. But you can see that whatever is available within our rules, we can work out as interim measures till the final disposal of the matter by ICC. So a whole lot will depend upon how these both streams of measures are worked out. So the ICC proceedings in terms of proper inquiry proceeding, and the proceedings in measures in terms of proactive measures of ensuring equality through the empowerment process, dissemination of information process also plays a crucial role in ensuring substantive equality. सबको ये लगना चाहिए कि I'm in this place because of my ability, my talent, and I'm able to do my work in proper form, and my work environment gives me that support to finish my task in a professional way. So that could be a way of looking at all these legal mechanisms. And apart from, you see in the recent times, a lot of judgments and orders are coming up about how it's so important to emphasize on equality and non-discrimination on the basis of gender. So I just stop at this point so that we may be able to look at the questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nilabja, what we have done is we have made it a meeting mode now, so people can unmute themselves and ask questions. If we have too many, maybe we'll ask them to raise their hands so that we take it in a sequence. Okay, so thank you both. So let me, before we get questions from the floor, I have just one small query. It's about, see, supposing we have a guest lecturer who is coming, okay? And we have harassment allegations against the guest person, okay? So that person doesn't belong to the institute and so on and so forth. Now, so which ICC will take up? Is it the IG ICC, or if it happens in the college, is it the university ICC, or it's the host institution, which might be also problematic if that person who is coming to lecture is a freelance, let's say. So there is no other institutional mechanism that we can follow. And similarly, the reverse. Supposing one of my employees going outside on official duty, okay. And again, there is some evidence of, there is some instance of sexual harassment. Now, can that also be included, or it's strictly workplace definition?
Meena, please take that up. Meena, please take that up.
Yeah, and under the UGC regulation, even these short-term visits are also covered within the scope of campus, workplace, etc. If you look at the UGC regulations on campus, workplace, and also you will see the definition of employees and the students. It's very, very broad. So even the host institution can also initiate proceedings. If the employee is going on an official duty, it is still in the course of employment. It's very well written in the regulation. In the course of employment, that falls within the ambit of, like, the institution has the jurisdiction to initiate the proceedings.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It doesn't mean that the complainant belongs to another institution, say, but she complains to the host institution.
Yeah, because if you have sent a person from here as part of official duty, then that person is an employee of the university. But the complaint, the aggrieved woman, but you also have to see, because I think if you are looking at a person going outside and representing the university in another place, then the complaint should be filed within that institution where the person was making presentations or giving training, etc. Because, of course, a copy of which will come to your institution. Because otherwise, how will the complainant? You can't expect the complainant. If the complainant is in some way connected with the university, then it is possible, because otherwise, even procedurally, it would be difficult for the complainant to follow up with all the formalities. So it would always be better to have the complaint filed in the place where the complainant is located.
So that will be inter-institute.
Yeah. So we can extend a hand of cooperation so that the accused person could be, dealt with accordingly from us, with assistance from your institution.
Thank you.
Anyone?
Yeah,
Please.
I have a related question to what Professor Mishra was asking. Suppose we are doing a survey and we have given it to another agency. And there is a complaint from that team. They are doing our work, but it is outsourced to another agency. Will that also, will that fall in under IG's employment, definition of the ICC? This was a question, that was raised some time back during a discussion.
Okay. It is possible to include, for the reason that now with this UGC regulations, you see even field trips fall within the ambit. The training sessions come within the ambit. So maybe the outsourcing the survey as such may not find a mention in the regulations, but you can see that the very fact that you have outsourced it is on record, and the survey is conducted on your behalf. So therefore, that complaint can be placed before you and addressed, because where will that person otherwise go? Now, apart from what all I have said with respect to the institutional framework of higher education institutions, you can also see that the general criminal law takes care of, because there are people who may not come within the institutional ICC, but rather would prefer cases before the High Court or the lower court, criminal courts. as you may have now come across certain orders. So therefore, I would say that the general law also operates. So this mechanism is a mandatory requirement, but in addition to that, the general criminal law is being used for accessing depending on the preferences of the parties.
Yeah, I would also just like to add to that, Mr. Manoj Panda, that, you know, you would have an MOU with that party to whom you've entrusted this survey work, and therefore you are accountable for it. After all, IEG has signed an MOU, so you
Yes.
have an accountability. So if you look at it from that jurisdiction also, very much IEG would be a party. Yeah.
Just to add on that topic, because this is very relevant, we do a lot of outsourcing survey work. But supposing in the MOU, we have an explicit mention that, you know, that outsourcing agency will take due care and will make sure that there are no instances of blah, blah, blah sexual harassment. Even then, you know, you think the accountability will shift towards IG, or I mean, that's part of the clause with the outsourcing agency.
I think it's waiving that kind of a right in favor of the outsourcing agency may not be appropriate, because we are speaking about the fundamental right to equality.
No, I know. Yeah.
So, because in general law, you will see that, you know, if it is outsourced, then that agency has independence in terms of the work function. But these are questions about the fundamental right to. So whether an institution can waive off is no, it's not very supportive in that sense. So these basic rights need to be taken care of by the institution. Actually, it would be better. When I look at your question, I think all the MOUs should actually have a clause about ensuring no, these kind of laws.
Right.
Yeah, it would be better.
Sir, in respect to this, okay, if it is between the team, there is a harassment case, I don't know, maybe the complainant might choose to go to the police or something. But it could be that there is some transgression with some outside party, say the respondents in a survey. In that case, the person will, naturally the whole team is representing IEG. So I think they will complain to IEG. That's the natural thing. Even if they're not.
Yes, they will do that. I also want to tell you, you know, that if the party goes to the police or whatever, or even if they go to the Women's Commission and all, because it's a case which has happened with an institutional affiliation or in an institutional context, it is referred back to the head of that institution. So any cases which happen come back to our Vice Chancellor, for example, even from the Delhi Women's Commission or the National Commission for Women, and they automatically come to us in the ICC for our brief and, you know, for our action, and also our brief to the Vice Chancellor. Yes.
Professor Sekhar has his hands raised.
I had a question about what Namita was saying. Can I come in?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you both, Namita and Meena. You know, I was wondering about two things. What Namita was saying just now about, you know, a complaint possibly being referred back to the institution. Could you say something about, you know, whether the act is sort of binding, or you know, what is the actual status of the adoption of the guidelines within you know, by institutions? Is the act binding even when the guidelines may not be sort of adopted by individual institutions? Is that mandatory according to the law? You know, I mean, so it would be useful to know that. And the second thing was, you know, in terms of how, you know, the ICC is meant to sort of actually help in terms of enabling people to, a possible victim to actually come forward. Have there been instances where, specialized training courses have been designed for ICC members, or orientation sort of sessions that can actually enable ICC members to, to take a more positive view of, in terms of what their responsibilities are when such cases may come to light or may be brought before them?
Okay. I'll answer your second question first, Veena, and then I'll ask Meena to answer your first question, which is a more legal question. So yes, one of the mandates given to ICC is also to, do capacity building of those who are engaged in ICC work. So, the model works like this in a university, that there is only one ICC for the university. So in Delhi University, for example, there is one ICC, but every college has an independent ICC because every higher education institute is seen as a separate institution. So now a lot of college teachers hold these desks on a rotational basis. And even to deconstruct the act or to understand the follow-up law, which Meena was saying that you have to work closely with criminal law also, you have to do a lot of capacity building workshops for them. So ICC does hold these workshops. And on gender sensitization, we work closely with the Center for Women's Development Studies. In fact, our office and their office are on the same floor. So we work in close tandem with them as well. Initially, both were fused together. Both the tasks were entrusted to this center. Now they've bifurcated the offices. So yes, we do this. And if, you want to do a short legal course or something, even those workshops and courses are available and people can be sent there. But, the UGC regulations also give you a workbook alongside. So, there is how to follow the system and what to do, the operational parts, etc. All that is also made quite apparent and clear. So it's not so difficult. The toughest part is, arriving at a sentence. When you prove somebody guilty, then what sentence do you serve? What punishment you give? That becomes difficult sometimes because UGC gives you very limited options. So in that case, we also refer to the civil service rules, and we are allowed to extrapolate from the civil service rules. So that's about capacity building and ICC. Meena, you can answer the first question, please.
Namita, if I can just clarify, I may not have made myself completely clear. Yeah. What I was referring to was, I'm aware of the capacity building, the provision for that. And what we are actually now in the midst of is an instance of that, right? But I was wondering actually, there might be cases where members of the ICC or the institution as such might feel that it is better to sort of see if the case is, it might be better if the case is actually sort of dealt with on an informal basis, so to speak, right? Yeah. Now, in that case, clearly there is room for the ICC itself to sort of, have a better perspective on how these cases need to be looked at. In that situation, what might be the possibilities for an orientation sort of, not a program, but orientation sessions for the ICC to be actually sort of more affirmative in their approach?
Yeah, so that's a very valid issue that you've raised, Veena. So, it takes a lot to decide about whether a case should even be considered as a sexual harassment case. And the ICC has to meet, deliberate, and then also examine the complaint letter, and often also meet the complainant to find out whether there is a cause or a case for sexual harassment or not. And in such issues, training workshops can be organized because the line of demarcation is actually very fine. Now, there are some complainants, even if they have very trivial complaints, and you tell them that there can be a reconciliation, because the law tells you that reconciliation is also possible and we can have counseling sessions and face-to-face reconciliation, they are totally rigid about wanting to go through the whole proceedings of ICC. So although ICC can intervene and try to persuade through a counseling approach and tell them when a case makes for a case and when a case does not make for a case but makes for reconciliation or counseling, if the complainant is absolutely determined that she wants an inquiry and she wants a proper ICC inquiry, even if the ICC feels it doesn't make for a proper inquiry, we have to go ahead. We may not be able to prove anything, but we go through all the procedures and processes. We even have to do it, Veena, when there are false cases. We have encountered 3 or 4, at least in my innings of 4 years there, Meena's been there even longer, I encountered at least 4 or 5 false cases where people were falsely implicated and, but we had to go through the whole proceeding to even establish that. Meena, you may add to this, please.
Yeah, I just pointed out a few things about the mandatory application of law. I think once there is a law enacted by Parliament, and then once there is a UGC regulations, whether it is adopted by the university or not, it is binding on us. And interestingly, you will see in the last part of the UGC regulations that if the employer is not taking up initiatives as outlined in the objectives portion, then quite punitive measures could be initiated by the UGC at the UGC level. So you can see that the approach is to see that there is sensitization, there are cases being handled in an effective way so that the safety and security of particularly women and the students have been addressed. So the mandatory application of law is there. Whether we adopt any particular EC resolution or not, it is automatically binding on us once it is being enacted and adopted by Parliament and UGC. Second is about the, I would say also that the UGC regulations specifically mention about the need for updating ourselves with the legal developments. For instance, the case laws which are coming up from the courts from time to time on sexual harassment cases also need to be part of the jurisprudence on these cases of sexual harassment of women, etc. Which, for instance, recently there was the Delhi High Court order that the ICC should consist, this was in the context of the government departments, that should have members from outside the department also, so that the independence and impartiality of the ICC as a body can be established. So it is important to see ICC as a body which is impartial in its assessment. It needs to be seen as a trustworthy institutional setup so that the parties would be able to participate effectively in the proceedings. So these are not written anywhere, but this High Court order specifically stated about the need for bringing in members from outside the government departments to be as a part of ICC in order to generate that feeling of independence and impartiality. So you can see that the case law developments which happen in the regular courts also need to be included or looked into in order to see how we operationalize the ICC's functioning within the institutions. And in the UGC regulations, there is a mandatory requirement of students if the complaint is involving or made against students. If there is a student involvement, then student members are to be elected to be part of the ICC. So they are not nominated members. They are to be elected. The university had framed the rules for student elections. Now, due to the lockdown, there is it is difficult to conduct the elections at this stage. But otherwise, student members are a mandatory part, elected student members as part of the ICC in issues involving students. These harassment issues involving students. So there is a mandatory requirement.
Professor Sekhar has some question, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions, in fact. The first one is, as you know, IIG is a residential campus. Here, quite a few faculty members live on the campus and also our administrative staff. Suppose there is a complaint against one of the IIG employees, but that happens within the premises of the household on the campus. So does ICC have jurisdiction over such cases? Because neither the employee nor neither the complainant nor the respondent, actually the workplace, the household does not constitute the workplace in this strict definition. In that case, does ICC's jurisdiction extend to such cases? One. Second is, Dr. Namita mentioned a few false cases and cases which are basically intended for harassment, perhaps. So is there any mechanism or are there any provisions to deter such false cases? Yeah,
Okay, so I'll answer your second question and then give the first question to Meena because she'll tell you what the legal position is. So when there are false cases, and they are very obvious false cases, then of course the accused are exonerated of all charges immediately, but we do put some sort of a sentence or a punishment even for the person who has given a false case. And those are not very major punishments or anything, but you tell her to attend a gender sensitization course, or you debar her from some privilege for some period of time, etc. Or she's sometimes even called for personal counseling and told that, this false case has been used. And, Dr. Sekhar, I'd like to tell you that we've had a lot of false cases where people having difficulties in submitting their PhD thesis, etc. This has become a trend of the last 3-4 years. They just slap cases in their CV. So we do take up action of this kind.
thank you.
Yeah. Meena?
Yeah, I just mentioned that under the parliamentary law, the workplace was defined in a very big fashion because that was expected to be covering government departments and all. But if you look at the UGC regulations, the workplace, campus, etc., have very broad meaning. For instance, the hostels. So it speaks about the wardens, provost, and all to be part of this sensitization exercise to disseminate information about the UGC regulations, etc. So the workplace, I would say that as part of the residential system of the institution, it should come within the ambit of workplace. For instance, it says about the university buses. So even the harassment, which could be brought in terms of what is being experienced as part of the journey in a university's vehicle, is also part of the regulations scope. So I would say that workplace in a residential institution, that should also be finding a place for having action before the ICC. This is only in the UGC regulations, but that is anyway supplementary to the Parliament Act.
Thank you.
I thought I'll just make a comment here. Of course, the legal part is very important for the administration of the institute, but the other side of it, which Dr. Namita explained, I think that's at the crux of it. It's the mindset and the attitude which has to be formed, because this any kind of this predatory or whatever we say, this kind of mentality itself is a source of damage for the institute and society. So as Veena mentioned, even if it is informally handled, if this any complaint, it can have effects on gender relations even outside the complainant's ambit, because there is a lot of difference between sometimes a lot of difference between the status of the two parties. So fear of job losing and all this comes in, and in that case I can indirectly say the other people can also be indirect victims, because this kind of favor is demanded. And secondly, an incident happens means it can affect new entrants also, especially girls. So this is my comment. Just I know the law doesn't address that, but these are important aspects of changing the mindset, I feel.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. We support that.
Anyone from ICC? So
yeah, we should probably do some workshop for the ICC.
Any question from ICC, or we can, or anybody else?
Nilesh, I have one question. Shekhar this side.
Sure.
Yeah. Actually, my question is the burden of proof is completely on the respondent, right, as per the legislation? And am I right in supposing that the entire burden of proof lies on the respondent, or is it also shared by the complainant?
It is shared equally, because even the complainant has to give proof and evidence of whatever she's claiming has been the kind of violation, sexual violation or abuse that she has faced, and she has to give a witness list, etc., and those witnesses are also called. And otherwise it can be just some fantasy or imagination also sometimes. So the burden of proof is on both parties, and the findings, before the report is finalized, the findings are distributed to both parties, and both parties are given time to raise further cross questions and cross examination issues, or furnish additional proof, etc. So it is on both parties.
Thank you.
We can close it, Nilabja, if there is nothing else.
Can we close it?
Yeah, I mean, it is 5:35, so we. Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, I can just end by thank you all, and we hope to see you again. And when we are out of this online mode and offline, we'll probably have another session. And obviously there'll be more questions, and we plan to have more workshops and things like this. And I liked your complementarity, these things. That's, I think, fundamental to prevent any kind of things happening. So we should be all working towards it. With that, thank you again, both Namita and Meena, if I may. And thank you, Nilabja, for organizing this. Thank you, Susil, for coordinating all that. Okay, and thank you all for participating. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks to the participants, to the speakers, and coordinators, and Professor Mishra for this important event. I think both of them brought the legal and the social side, particularly the psychological side by Namita ji. I think if that part is addressed, much of the problem will be prevented in any case, especially in our kind of institution.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.